I sat alone on the stone bench in Liberty Green Park, Minneapolis, as snowflakes drifted down like forgotten memories resurfacing. The world around me was hushed and cold. No children's laughter echoing from the playground. No distant carols from nearby cafes, just the wind whispering through bare branches and the soft crunch of snow underfoot. I, Cassandra Blake, CEO of Everin Technologies, wrapped my gray wool coat tighter around my slender frame. My white cashmere scarf was knotted perfectly, a habit from years of maintaining an impeccable image. Beside me sat a silver gift box, tied with pristine white ribbon, a platinum watch from the board marking 10 years at the helm. But to me it felt meaningless. For a decade, I'd stood at the pinnacle of success, never taking a real vacation, never showing vulnerability. No one knew I'd once been an orphan, sitting silently in a foster home on Christmas Eve, waiting to be chosen, but never was. That was the night I stopped crying for good, and yet 30 years later, despite my empire, I returned to this bench every Christmas, facing the echoes of that loneliness, hoping for a miracle that never came. Until tonight. A small voice pierced the quiet light footsteps approaching. I looked up to see a man in his late 30s, bundled in a flannel jacket and gray beanie, holding hands with a little girl. They paused nearby, and the girl tugged free, walking straight to me with wide, innocent eyes. "You look sad," she said softly. "If you want, you can borrow my dad for a while." Her words hit me like a sudden thaw, cracking the ice around my heart. Who was this child, and why did her simple offer stir something I'd buried so deep? The little girl's words hung in the air, simple, yet piercing like a crack in the armor I'd worn for so long. I stared at her, my composed facade faltering for the first time in years. Who was I to this child? And more importantly, who was I anymore? I am Cassandra Blake, 38 years old, CEO of Everin Technologies, one of the leading tech firms in Minneapolis. My days are filled with board meetings, acquisitions, and decisions that shape industries. I built an empire from nothing, rising from the shadows of my past to command respect in glass towers overlooking the city. But that past never truly leaves me. I grew up in the Riverview foster home in St. Paul, a place where Christmas Eves were spent in dimly lit common rooms, watching other kids get picked up by families while I sat alone clutching a worn blanket. No one ever chose me. I learned early to stop hoping, to stop showing weakness. Tears were for the vulnerable, and vulnerability was a luxury I couldn't afford. So I buried it all, channeling that pain into ambition. By 28, I was running my first startup. By 30, I'd sold it for millions. Now at the helm of Everin, I oversee innovations that connect the world, ironic considering how disconnected I've always felt. But tonight on this bench, the weight of that isolation pressed harder than usual. The silver gift box beside me mocked my achievements. A platinum watch, cold precise just like me. I hadn't expected company, let alone this interruption. The man approached cautiously, his flannel jacket dusted with snow, his beanie pulled low over his forehead. He looked to be in his late 30s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a gentle smile that seemed genuine, not calculated. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and warm like a fire crackling in the distance. "Mira here is, she's got a big heart. She doesn't mean to intrude." Mira. The girl beamed up at me, her cheeks rosy from the cold, her small hand still extended as if offering more than words. She couldn't have been older than 6, bundled in a pink parka with mismatched mittens. "It's okay." I managed my voice, steadier than I felt. "She's observant." The man nodded, kneeling slightly to her level. "Mira, we should let the lady be. It's getting late." But Mira shook her head stubbornly. "But Dad, she looks like she needs a hug. Or maybe hot cocoa. We have cookies left." He chuckled softly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small wrapped bundle. "Here," he said, offering it to me. One of our homemade gingerbread cookies. Mira insisted on baking extras for people who might need them. Merry Christmas. I took at my gloved fingers, brushing his bare ones. His skin was rough, calloused working hands, not like the manicured ones I shook in boardrooms. The warmth from the cookie seeped through the paper, a small but tangible comfort. "Thank you," I whispered, surprised at the emotion welling up. No one had given me something so unpretentious in years. He straightened, tipping his head. "No problem. Take care out here, it's freezing." As they turned to leave, Mira waved enthusiastically. "Eat the whole thing, it'll make you smile. And remember, you can borrow Dad any time, he's the best at telling stories." They walked away, their footsteps crunching in the snow, leaving me with the cookie in hand and a strange ache in my chest. For the first time in decades, I unwrapped it and took a bite. It was sweet, imperfect, with a hint of spice that warmed me from the inside. Who were they? A single dad and his daughter wandering the park on Christmas Eve, handing out kindness like it cost nothing. And why did it feel like they'd seen right through me, to the girl I'd long forgotten? That night back in my penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline, I couldn't shake the image of Mira's eyes or her father's quiet smile. For the first time, the silence of my empty home felt unbearable. I found myself wondering about them. Lucas, she'd called him Dad. What was their story? And why, after all these years of solitude, did I suddenly crave to know a week past? But the memory of that Christmas Eve lingered like the scent of gingerbread on my coat. I couldn't shake at the girl's innocent offer, her father's quiet kindness. For the first time in years, I found myself drawn back to Liberty Green Park, not out of habit, but with purpose. I arrived early, the snow crunching under my boots, carrying a small bag of fresh cookies from a bakery near my office. The platinum watch still sat unworn in its box at home. It felt too sterile, too much like the life I'd built. I sat on the same bench, watching families stroll by, their laughter a distant echo. Part of me wondered if I'd imagined the encounter, if loneliness had conjured them up. But then there they were, Lucas and Mira, emerging from the path, her small hand in his. Mira spotted me first, her face lighting up. "It's the sad lady Dad look." Lucas smiled, a touch of surprise in his eyes. "Well, hello again. Didn't expect to see you here." I stood brushing snow from my coat. "I came back with cookies to return the favor." Mira clapped her mittened hands. "Yay, can we share them?" We ended up walking the park's winding paths, the snowflakes swirling around us like confetti. Mira skipped ahead, pointing out squirrels and half-buried benches, her energy infectious. Would you? Lucas walked beside me, his stride easy, unhurried. He didn't pry, but there was a warmth in his presence that made the cold bearable. "She's full of life," I said, watching her. He nodded. "Mira's my everything. Her mom passed when she was 2 cancer. It's just us now. I work maintenance at a local school, fixing leaks and lights. Pays the bills, gives me time for her." I glanced at him, noting the faint lines around his eyes, the kind etched by worry and love. "That sounds fulfilling." He chuckled softly. "It is in its way. No glamour, but it's honest. What about you? You seem like someone with a bigger world." I hesitated. For once, I didn't lead with my title. "I run a company downtown. Tech stuff. Keeps me busy, too busy, maybe." We reached a small cafe at the park's edge, its windows glowing invitingly. "Care for some coffee?" I asked, surprising myself. "Sure," Lucas said, "if you're not in a rush." Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of fresh brews and cinnamon. Lucas ordered a latte Mira, a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. I stuck to black coffee, no sugar, my usual armor against indulgence. We found a corner table, Mira coloring on a napkin while we talked. "You mentioned that the park feels like home," Lucas said gently. Why here? I stared into my cup, the steam rising like unspoken truths. I grew up not far from here in a foster home, Riverview in St. Paul. Christmases were lonely. I'd sit waiting for someone to pick me, but no one did. This bench reminds me of that girl, I guess. The one who learned to stop waiting. His expression softened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Riverview, I was there too. Born in '85, shuffled through the system. No clue about my parents, just a file saying, abandoned. I aged out at 18, worked odd jobs until Mira came along. That place? It teaches you to survive, but not always to connect. I froze, my heart pounding. Riverview. The same home. A coincidence? Or something more. That's unbelievable. I was there in the 90s, left when I was 18 too. Built everything from scratch after that. We shared stories, then halting at first, then flowing. He spoke of nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone out there cared. I admitted to the walls I'd built how success had become my shield. Mira dozed off in his lap, her hot chocolate half finished, and in that quiet I felt a crack in my defenses. For the first time someone saw me not the CEO, but the orphan, who'd never been chosen. As we parted, Lucas handed me Mira's napkin, drawing a stick figure of me smiling. She thinks you need more friends, he said with a grin. I laughed, a real one. She's wise beyond her years. Walking back to my car, the cold didn't bite as sharply, but questions swirled in my mind. Riverview. Could our paths have crossed before I thought of the anonymous donations I'd made through my foundation? Future roots. Funding gifts for the kids there. Had any reached him? That night in my penthouse, I couldn't sleep. The coincidence gnawed at me. I pulled up my laptop, logging into the Foundation's secure files. My fingers hovered over the search bar. Lucas Dean Ford. I typed, my pulse racing. What if there was more to this than chance? What if our stories were intertwined in ways I couldn't yet see? The search results loaded slowly each second, stretching like the winter night outside. I scrolled through old records, my breath catching at familiar names from my own time there. And then, buried in a donor log from decades ago, something jumped out, a note about a young boy receiving a holiday gift, half a cookie, and a handwritten promise to share. My own words from when I was 10. Could it be I dug deeper, cross-referencing dates and details? The Foundation had archived everything, including recipient lists. Lucas's name appeared again and again, tied to anonymous contributions I'd quietly made over the years. But that cookie note, it was mine. Had I unknowingly reached out to him back then? I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a meeting in the park. It felt like fate circling back, demanding I face what I'd run from. What would happen if I told him? Would it change everything or nothing? The questions kept me up until dawn, the city lights blurring through my window like unanswered prayers. The search results stared back at me from the screen, a digital ghost from my past. Lucas Dean Ford, born 1985, resident of Riverview Foster Home until he aged out. The details blurred as my eyes scanned lower notes on holiday gifts distributed through anonymous donors. There, in faded type, was the entry I'd been dreading yet hoping for. Recipient received partial cookie and handwritten note from the unidentified girl circa 1995. Note reads, "If someone takes you home, I'll share my cookie with them. I promise." Kept item as keepsake. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of my desk. That was my note, my 10-year-old scrawl scribbled in a moment of desperate hope during one of those endless Christmas Eves at Riverview. I'd slipped it into the donation box along with half my cookie, imagining it might reach some other lonely kid. But I'd never known if it did, until now. Tears welled up, hot and unbidden, spilling onto my keyboard. A Cassandra Blake who hadn't cried in boardrooms or during billion-dollar negotiations was sobbing in the dim light of my penthouse office. The irony hit me like a wave. All these years I'd funded future routes, anonymously sending money to Riverview to spare other kids the emptiness I'd felt. And somehow my childhood gesture had found its way to Lucas, the man who'd handed me a cookie in the park, whose daughter had offered to lend him to me. Was this fate, or just a cruel coincidence mocking my isolation? I paced the room, the city lights twinkling indifferently below. Lucas had mentioned surviving the system, but he'd never spoken of specific memories like this. Did he even remember the note? Or had it been just another fleeting kindness in a sea of neglect? My mind raced back to our conversation in the cafe, his quiet admission of feeling invisible, my own echoes of the same pain. Riverview had shaped us both, turning vulnerability into armor, but now this discovery cracked mine wide open. I couldn't keep it to myself. The truth felt too heavy, too profound to bury like the rest of my past. With shaking fingers, I picked up my phone and dialed the number he'd given me casually after our walk. It rang twice before his voice answered, warm and unsuspecting. "Cassandra, everything okay? It's late. I need to see you." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And Mira, too. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Everin Tower downtown. It's important." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Mira will be thrilled. She's been talking about you nonstop. Sure, we'll be there around noon." Noon. I confirmed, hanging up before doubt could creep in. The next morning dragged. I arrived at Everin early, bypassing the usual flurry of meetings. My assistant raised an eyebrow when I cleared my schedule, but I waved her off. In my corner office with its panoramic views of the snow-dusted skyline, I printed the relevant pages from the Foundation's archives. The donor logs, the recipient details, even a scanned copy of my childish handwriting. I laid them out on the glass conference table, my heart pounding like it hadn't since my first big pitch. When Lucas and Mira arrived, the receptionist buzzed them up. Mira burst in first, her eyes wide at the sleek space. "Whoa, this is like a spaceship. Do you live here?" I smiled, kneeling to her level. "Sort of, but it's just work. Come sit." Lucas followed, looking slightly out of place in his casual jeans and sweater amid the polished chrome. "Nice digs," he said, glancing around. "What's this about? You sounded serious on the phone." I gestured to the table. "Sit down. I found something up about us." He frowned, but complied, Mira climbing onto his lap. I slid the papers toward him, starting with the foster home records. "Riverview. We both grew up there, but I dug deeper. Look at this." As he read, his expression shifted: confusion, then recognition, then shock. His fingers traced the scanned note. "This. I kept this. The half cookie and the promise. It was the first time I felt like someone cared enough to share." I nodded, my throat tight. It was me. I was that girl, 10 years old, slipping it into the donation box on Christmas Eve, hoping it would make a difference for someone. Lucas looked up, his eyes meeting mine, wide with disbelief. "You. All these years. The Foundation gifts that kept coming. They were from you. Anonymous, mostly," I whispered. "But yes, I never knew they reached you." He set the papers down, his hand covering his mouth for a moment. Mira peered at the note. "That's pretty writing. Did you really share your cookie, Cassie?" I laughed through tears. I did. And now, it feels like it came full circle. Lucas reached across the table, his hand finding mine. "I carried that note in my wallet for years. It reminded me that kindness exists even in the dark, and now, here you are, the person who gave me that hope." The room felt smaller, the weight of decades lifting. I'd spent my life building walls, but this revelation tore them down. We weren't strangers. We'd been connected all along, two orphans finding each other in the snow. What came next, I didn't know, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. At Everin Tower the next day felt like an eternity compressed into hours. I paced my office, the panoramic windows framing the snowy Minneapolis skyline like an indifferent backdrop to my turmoil. The printed archives lay on the table, a bridge to a past I'd never shared. When my assistant buzzed that Lucas and Mira had arrived, my heart raced. I smoothed my blouse, a rare nervous gesture, and opened the door myself. Mira bounded in first, her eyes wide at the sleek, modern space. "This is so fancy." "Do you have a spaceship button?" I laughed softly, bending down to her. "Not quite, but I do have hot chocolate in the break room. Come on." Lucas followed, glancing around with quiet curiosity. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to the polished executives who usually filled these halls. "Impressive place," he said, his voice steady but warm. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep." "I'm fine," I replied, leading them to the conference table. "Sit. I made coffee latte for you like last time." He raised an eyebrow but sat Mira climbing onto the chair beside him. She doodled on a notepad I'd left out, oblivious to the tension. I took a breath and slid the yellowed paper across the scanned note from my childhood alongside the foster records. "Lucas, look at this. From Riverview." He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read. The color drained from his face. "This note. If someone takes you home, I'll share my cookie with them." I had this. Kept it in my shoebox of things from the home. It was the only gift that felt personal. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "It was me. I wrote it when I was 10 on Christmas Eve, slipped it into the donation box with half my cookie. I never knew who got it until now." He stared at the paper, then at me, his eyes glistening. "You, all this time. The anonymous gifts through Future Roots. They kept me going, school supplies, books. I thought it was some distant benefactor. But it was you." Mira leaned over, peering at the note. "That's your writing, Cassie. You shared your cookie with Dad." I smiled through tears, reaching out to touch her hand. "I did, sweetie. Even though I didn't know him then. I was just a lonely kid like he was." Lucas set the paper down carefully as if it were fragile glass. "I carried that note for years. It was proof that someone out there believed in sharing in kindness without strings. It got me through tough nights. And now, here you are. Here you... the girl who gave me hope." The room blurred as tears fell freely. For the first time, I didn't fight them. Mira hopped down and hugged my legs. "Don't cry, Cassie. Now you have us." Lucas stood, pulling me into a gentle embrace. His arms were strong, steady, the kind of hold that felt like home. "Thank you," he murmured. "For then and for now." We spent the afternoon talking, piecing together fragments of our shared past. Riverview had been a cold place for both of us, but that one act of mine had rippled forward, connecting us across decades. Mira listened wide-eyed, then declared, "This means we're like family already." As evening fell, I suggested dinner. "Not here, somewhere real." Lucas grinned. "My place. Nothing fancy, but Mira makes great spaghetti." We drove to his modest apartment in a quiet suburb, the city lights fading behind us. The space was cozy bookshelves crammed with stories, toys scattered like joyful chaos. Mira dragged me to the kitchen to help with sauce, her laughter filling the air. Lucas chopped vegetables, glancing at me with the softness that made my chest ache. Over dinner, we shared more my rise from foster kid to CEO, his quiet life balancing work and fatherhood. Mira slurped her noodles, then fetched crayons and paper. "I'm drawing our story." She presented it proudly, stick figures of a girl on a bench, a boy with a cookie, and now 3 people holding hands under a Christmas tree. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, "Family doesn't start with blood. It starts with a shared cookie." I traced the words, my voice breaking. "You're right, Mira. Absolutely right." Lucas met my gaze across the table, his hand finding mine under it. "We've been connected longer than we knew. Maybe this is our second chance at family, at not being alone. That night as I drove home, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in peace. For 38 years, I'd built walls to protect the orphan girl inside me. But Lucas and Mira had slipped through, not with force, but with kindness. A borrowed dad, a shared cookie, a drawing that redefined everything. I glanced at the platinum watch on my wrist, now no longer cold, but a reminder of time I'd wasted. No more. I'd found my miracle not in success, but in two strangers who'd become my world. And in that, I finally felt chosen.